Greetings. I am Walt Bauer, and I'd like to welcome you to the Human Development Institute's third fall seminar. My brief visual description is I am a white male wearing glasses with hazel eyes and a blue shirt with a gray and blue striped tie. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm sitting in front of a virtual background. My virtual background is a 3-story brick academic building that has offices for the Human Development Institute on the University of Kentucky campus. We welcome all the participants who are joining us today. Our moderators and panelists will provide an opportunity for questions today, and we welcome questions from all of our participants. Please type your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box for a robust question and answer session. If you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see the Q&A option. Please use the chat box for technical questions. We have live captioning for the webinar in the closed captioning feature. Turn on the captioning by clicking on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and then clicking Show Subtitle. Should you have any questions about CEUs, you can contact me. My email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. Again, my email address is walt.bauer@uky.edu. Please take a moment to complete our brief evaluation. You'll receive an email that provides a link to access the session evaluation. It is really helpful as we plan for upcoming webinars. The title of today's webinar is Leadership in Our Backyard: The History and Power of Advocacy in Our State. It's a pleasure and privilege to introduce our moderators today. The presentation and panel will be led by Dr. Harold Kleinert of the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. Dr. Kleinert is Director Emeritus. We will also be led today by Bev Harp, HDI Director of Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers. Bev and Harold are also Kentucky Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities faculty, also known as LEND. I'm now going to turn it over to Harold.
Thank you, Walt. Let me put my PowerPoint up while I am.
We can see it, Harold.
Okay, slideshow from the beginning. Okay. All right, is it? There we go. Okay.
See it.
I'm a old white male, beard, glasses, hearing aids. And I'm in front of a Kentucky Land blue UK background. And my pronouns are he and him, and I'm presenting along with I'm coordinating this webinar along with my co-presenter Bev Harp, who will introduce herself in just a few minutes. Okay, we wanted just to give you a little bit of background information before we really delve into the leadership that has been so strong within our own state. We'll discuss many, but we might make a very important disclaimer. Certainly not all of the major advocacy contributions over the past 50 years in our state. This is not meant to be an exhaustive set of advocates, and there are folks who, just because of the nature of the time that we have, we cannot enumerate on all of the contributions that have been made. And we also want to offer, in addition to looking at the past and the present, a perspective for the future. We have 3 objectives: increase our collective understanding of advocacy in Kentucky, increase our knowledge of key advocates in our state and their contributions, and then identify effective strategies that Kentucky advocates have used to affect change and how those strategies may in fact continue to be used going into the future. Okay. And one of the things that I think is very important for us to remember is that much of the progress, and of course we have a long way to go. I don't want to suggest that we're at a state of that's acceptable, but much of the progress that we've made in the since the past has truly been remarkable, and it wasn't that long ago. If you go to the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, a terrible state of neglect for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I've captured just a couple of photos from Christmas in Purgatory by Burton Blatt. This was a state institution in Connecticut, Seaside, but this could have been an institution in Kentucky. And I, at that time, when just beginning my career, had similar experiences in state institutions. And so this is the kind of life that many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities were living not that long ago. How did things change? Well, one of the keys are parent groups. The National Association for Retarded Children, well, now it's just called the ARC. And you will learn from several members, including Marie Allison, who has played a key role in ARC in our own state. Brown versus Board of Education. And you say, well, wait a second. Brown versus Board of Education was about separate is not equal. Around the schooling of African-American children. And that's true. But if you read what this court said in its ruling, listen to what it said. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. It didn't just say African-American children. It said all children, and parents of children of kids with significant disabilities who weren't even allowed in school at that time could read this and know that it meant, whether the court meant it or not, they were part of the all. Research and training efforts, increased public awareness, the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities, institutional exposés and media coverage. That's how Geraldo Rivera actually got his start. And then finally, right to education cases, including one here in Kentucky, where kids were denied the right to be in public school simply because of the severity of their disability. We're going to focus today on developmental disabilities. The original legislation is the Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act of 1975. That authorized the creation of the DD network within each state, state councils on developmental disabilities, state protection and advocacy systems, and we'll hear from representatives of both our council and our state protection and advocacy agency, and then university centers of excellence in developmental disabilities education, research, and service. It's a long name. In Kentucky, it's Human Development Institute. Every state has these three agencies. They're the DD network, and we're meant to work together to improve the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So what is a developmental disability? It's a severe chronic disability attributed to a mental or physical disability, or a combination of both, manifested before the person attains the age of 22 and is likely to continue indefinitely. It results in substantial functional limitations in 3 or more of the following areas of major life activity. I'm not going to read them to you, but it's the notion that people who have developmental disabilities have major challenges in terms of functional limitations, such that They have an individual need for a combination and sequence of services, individualized supports that are lifelong or extended in duration and are individually planned and coordinated. And it's individuals with developmental disabilities that P&As, DD councils, and USEDs were created to assist and help improve their lives as well as the lives of their families. So, what were the legal and policy changes at the national level that changed the picture from the two slides I showed you at the beginning to a future of much more hope now? Well, I would argue there are essentially three major thrusts of policy: the right to education, the right to be free from discrimination, and the right to an integrated life in the community. In education, in 1975, the passage of 94-142, it was originally called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. It's now called IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It established a right to a free, appropriate education for all children. Early in my teaching career, I was teaching in a school that was operated by the ARC for children who were considered to be below trainable. They weren't allowed in public schools. And incidentally, trainable is the term we use for dogs. But IDEA changed that. And then there have been Supreme Court decisions like Raleigh in 82 and Andrew in 2017 that said it's not just you put a child in school, you have to have an IEP, an individualized education program, reasonably calculated for the child to receive educational benefits, and not just minimal progress, but appropriately ambitious in light of the child's circumstances, challenging objectives. Okay. Then there are other strands to the law. We won't go into all of them, but two of the most important are least restrictive environment. The child is to be removed from the regular education classroom only to the extent necessary. And we are first to consider how the child's goals and objectives can be met in that regular education environment with appropriate modifications and supports. Also, shared parent and student decision-making. This is a partnership. Other parts of disability law, the right to education is certainly critical. Life is more than school. So what is the source of these other protections, these other laws? Certainly Section 504, the Rehab Act of 1973, followed by the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990, followed by the 2008 amendments to expand some of the protections in the ADA. And all of this legislation was based on the fundamental concepts of the civil rights movement. At the core of this was Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. And you say, wait a second, Section 504, that means there must have been 503 sections in front of it. But there's probably been no more important section or statement for people with disabilities in our country than this one, Section 504. No otherwise qualified handicapped individual in the United States shall solely by reason of his handicap be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Public schools, universities, state and local governments, parks and recreation all receive federal financial assistance. However, Section 504 did not apply to all of society because it left out the private sector. And so the Americans with Disabilities Act and subsequent amendments were passed in 1990 and 2008. You will hear from one of our leaders in Kentucky who was actually arrested in demonstrations for the ADA at the U.S. Capitol. He was doing nonviolent protest, but he was arrested anyway to get passage of this basic civil rights thing in our nation's history. ADA extended protections of Section 504 to nearly all aspects of American society, including privately owned businesses and facilities. Okay, and more recently, the U.S. Supreme Court Olmstead decision, and essentially it said we cannot have unjustified segregation of persons with disabilities, according to the provisions of the ADA itself, and that community-based services to persons with disabilities must be provided when this language is a little paternalistic, but we have to take what the Supreme Court said. State treatment professionals deem placement appropriate. Individuals not oppose community-based placement, and community-based services can be reasonably accommodated. As part of that, the court encouraged each state to develop a comprehensive, effective working plan for placing qualified individuals in less restrictive settings, and a waiting list that moved at a reasonable pace. Okay, now Kentucky has an Olmstead plan, and more important than that, Kentucky is now revisiting and revising its Olmstead plan. HDI will coordinate that work in the coming months. So this is something that hopefully will have an impact, a future impact upon services in our state. Ongoing Olmstead decision impact. The court's Olmstead decision has been applied in cases, for example, related to residential community living alternatives, integrated versus segregated or sheltered employment options, the notion that everyone should who wants to should have the opportunity to work in competitive integrated employment, as well as the provision of mental health services in the most integrated community environment possible. Okay, what of events in Kentucky? Who was advocating and pushing for change in our own state? Some of that Kentucky advocacy contributed to key changes in the law at the national level, such as the work of Arthur Campbell. Some of that Kentucky advocacy led to implementation of these laws in our own states, such as the work of Jane Hart. Some of the advocacy led to new initiatives in our state that reflected changes at the national level. Okay, here's just a few individuals. Okay, and I'm just going to briefly highlight them. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Nora Bryan. Nora Bryan started working with the Child Development Centers of the Bluegrass in the early 70s. He was there when the IDEA was first passed. And I can remember him taking trips to Eastern Kentucky to children who had been denied the right to be in public school, and working with families and teachers and therapists to begin to build services. He also directed HCI-supported employment and disability mentoring projects. He was a national leader in our own network, AUCD, to establish the role of self-advocates as full partners with professionals. And he was Kentucky statewide ADA coordinator, as many of you may well remember his most recent role till his retirement in 2014. He was relentless in his work to ensure accessibility and equality in every space, from state parks to libraries to airports, boarding booth, you name it. He was inducted in the Civil Rights Hall of Fame. Nora passed away just a few months ago. And one of the themes that you will see from this is that we have lost some of our key advocates in just the last few years. And so we have to be thinking, who is going to take up that torch now? Shannon Caldwell, he's a lifelong advocate for individuals with disabilities. He was a man with deaf blindness. He helped to write and act in our pre-service health training project, in which we train healthcare professionals, this with a module for dentists, on how to provide care to individuals with hearing and sensory impairments. He was a state leader of HDI's Consumer Advisory Council and a national leader of the AUCD Council on Leadership and Advocacy. He also did international advocacy with the Alstrom Syndrome International. He passed away just a couple of months ago. Jim Chesser, you'll hear from the leaders of the Chesser Advocacy Group that was founded in memory of his and his mom's tremendous advocacy. Lifelong advocate, founding president of Kentucky Self Advocates for Freedom. He was he led our Consumer Advisory Council. He was on the House Bill 144 Commission, regional and state supported living councils, served on the board of the ARC of Central Kentucky. He too passed away just a few years ago. Jane Hart. You know, we talk about supported living and heart supported living and Kentucky supported living program. Where did it come from? It came from Jane's tireless and lifelong contributions. She educated and advocated for the passage of the supported living legislation and its appropriation. And in 2006, the General Assembly renamed the program the Heart Supported Living to honor her dedication to self-determination. She was president of the ARC of Kentucky and chairperson of the Kentucky Disabilities Coalition. She passed away a few years ago. Chastity Ross. Chastity Ross was a 3-time member of the Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities. She was its chair. I think she was its chair more than once. She trained new DD Council chairs throughout the country. So she was both a state and a national leader. She met with legislators at the state and national level to bring attention to disability-related issues. And you can see all the things that she served as board members for, including our state OBR, election finance. In addition, she supported and advocated not only for people with disabilities, but also for LGBTQ youth and adults and for racial equality. I'm not going to read all of these things to you, but she had tremendous sense of humor, highly sought after speaker at schools, universities, passed away in 2020. And our sister agency, the Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities, has a self-advocate memorial award established in her name. Okay. Now, those are some of the past advocates. One of the things that I think is very striking is their tremendous contributions and the fact that they're no longer with us and the void that this creates. So one of the things we need to always be thinking about is who are our present leaders and then developing leaders for the future. We want to transition now to some of those current leaders who have had tremendous impact within our state. Marie Allison, you'll see a short video recently made about her work. She's a lifelong advocate for individuals with developmental disabilities in our state. She worked for Protection and Advocacy, a long-term leader of the ARC of Kentucky, and has contributed lifelong advocacy for a family member with a developmental disability. Arthur Campbell, lifelong self-advocate, advocated for the passage of the ADA, making public buses accessible in both the states of Colorado and Kentucky. He engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience, but that resulted in him being arrested at the U.S. Capitol in a sit-in for the passage of the ADA. He also was a former member of the HCI Consumer Advisory Council. We're going to hear we have a short tape on both of those. And then if the technology allows us, we will hear directly from Arthur. Okay, Walt, I will pass this over. I will stop sharing and pass this over to you.
Thank you, Harold. Have you stopped sharing?
I gotta stop sharing. I have stopped sharing.
Thank you for stopping the share.
The first tape will be Marie Allison.
Proud mother of Christopher Riddell, who is 48 years of age. He has a condition that's known as a mutated PIGA gene, which apparently caused most of his problems, but he was deprived of oxygen for about 3 minutes at birth, so he has a lot of challenges, but he has overcome them and doing very well right now. So very proud of him. Also the parent of another individual named Alan, who has a child who is 4 years old, Archer, and they live with his wife Mandy in South Carolina. In 1995, I guess, we had meetings about what we were going to do when Chris graduated from high school, and we asked where he would live, and I thought, well, maybe he could live in a group home, and I checked that out, decided that I did not want that because he's vulnerable, and I tried Habitat for Humanities, and they did not allow people with disabilities at that point. I would have to change their charter. So then we decided that we would just amend our house and rebuild, add on to it for Chris to have his private apartment. And we went through a process at that time where we had to go around and have people within 100 yards of us approve of us having a second kitchen in the house. They agreed to allow us to do the modification to the house. Chris got part of his funding for that from the Heart Supported Living Program, which is a program that Jane Hart and a group of people started, and then come forward to 2019, and the city was proposing a new ordinance that would allow for accessory dwelling units to be proper in Lexington. They didn't call our modification an accessory dwelling unit, but apparently it was. And so I assisted, and other people from the ARC, like Alva Clark, went to the different ordinance meetings for the city council, and we talked about how wonderful it is for Chris has his own independent living. He has his own entrance to the house, his own kitchen, his own bathroom, washer dryer, his whole unit. That makes him independent. And after 3 years, they passed it in 2021. The ARC is a national movement. I joined the ARC probably 40 years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but maybe when he was 3 or 4, because I wanted to know more about what I could do to help with Chris. And I've been to many of the national conferences that they have. They have wonderful speakers. They have a wonderful politically active organization. They will let us know when there needs to be action taken on particular issues. And right now, it's like the home and community-based services is an issue. We have a local group called the ARC of Central Kentucky, and I'm currently the president. We are in the movement toward getting rid of the waiting list. And we have a self-advocacy group called the Chesser Advocacy Group. And that's named after Nancy Chesser and Jim Chesser, who were tremendous advocates. Jim had cerebral palsy, and he was very active in the ARC movement. Nancy was very active in the ARC movement. They have both deceased at this point, so we named the group after them. And they meet monthly, They have speakers come to talk about like transportation issues, housing issues, employment issues, and they talk about what kind of advocacy needs to be done to improve in those areas. I think the ARC is a tremendous organization. There's a state chapter and local chapters throughout the state, and we just keep active. So we tried to find out what Chris could do. He tried watering plants at one point, and that didn't work out. And he likes dogs and cats, and so we decided that he could make dog biscuits. So we went to the Voc Rehab, and they suggested that we talk with a local chamber of commerce, and we had somebody help us. So he has his own business called Chris of Canine Cookies. It's incorporated, and he's an actual business owner, and he cooks the biscuits about 3 days a week, and we have them at McLeod's coffee shop where we regularly keep them stocked. He also serves them at Woodstock, which is his local vet, and then we give them to friends, and he'll go to different fairs like the Autism Walk. This Sunday he's going to sell them at church. So he finds out where fairs are. He sells them at Paws for the Cause. So he just gets involved and makes money. He has an ABLE account, which is an account that he can put the earnings from his business in there so that it doesn't affect him in regard to Medicaid eligibility. And, so it works out very well. And we're really proud of him and his cookie making business.
Thank you for watching this video presented by the Human Development Institute. Visit our website at hdi.uky.edu. To learn more about the organizations and initiatives mentioned in this video, please follow the links in the description.
Okay, the second video is will be of Arthur Campbell.